Wrestling is the hardest thing I've ever done in my life, and sometimes I genuinely question, is this worth it? My name is Shreddy, a professional wrestler and the 2022 NABBA Mr. Britain bodybuilding champion. I've been lifting since I was a teenager, and I've been competing in bodybuilding for over 10 years now. I'm not the guy to speak to if you want to become a pro bodybuilder, but if you do want to get bigger, get leaner, and feel better about yourself, I might be able to help out. Anything else that was this hard and had such a little short-term payoff, I would have given up on this a long time ago. I've been wrestling now since 2016. The reason I continue to do it is because I'm chasing the dream that I had as a kid. When I say that wrestling is the hardest thing I've done, you might think that I'm talking about the physical aspect of it. I've had two major injuries: a torn bicep, which I've done twice, a broken shoulder, an AC joint disruption. Both times I was unable to wrestle and train in the gym for months and months and months. But that's only one part of wrestling. The other part that is probably even harder is the mental aspect of wrestling. So in this video, I just want to give a little bit of a sit down talking head about my pursuit of wrestling, why it is the hardest thing I've ever done, and despite it being so difficult, why this idiot still continues to chase that dream. So why did I get started wrestling in the first place? When I was a kid, I grew up in a house with 4 sisters, 2 brothers, and my older brothers, big age gap between us. Wrestling was always on. In the early 90s, I remember the blue mats. Some of my earliest memories is WWF being on Sky Sports, The Undertaker, Bret Hart, Ultimate Warrior. Those characters just being on the TV is something that was kind of ingrained into me from a very young age. I actively became an interested fan. Probably around 98 is when I really got into wrestling. And I remember getting a copy of WWF Warzone, wore that copy out, WWF Attitude came out, and then things went to the next level with WWF SmackDown. But when these games came out, we were in the peak of the Attitude Era. And me, along with all my mates at school, absolutely loved wrestling. Fast forward a couple of years, going from primary school to high school, most of my mates grew out of wrestling, but I stuck with it. Wrestling has been a constant, one of the very few constants in my life that I've never phased out of, never grew out of. It's something that's always been there. And even now that I don't watch wrestling weekly on TV, I am still watching old wrestling. I'm obviously wrestling myself. I am still engaged with the current modern product through social media, and I typically go out my way to watch major WWE pay-per-views. So wrestling, when I say wrestling, for me, wrestling is WWE. I didn't even know what indie wrestling was until I was a teenager. I think my introduction to indie wrestling was the Game FAQs Pro Wrestling board, or the Wrestling Channel on Sky. I can't remember which came first, but that was my introduction into indie wrestling. So as a kid, wrestling to me was the WWE. And that's what I've always wanted to do. Ever since being a little kid, I would used to say it, and my older sisters, my parents would say, "Oh, that's daft, you're never going to be a wrestler." But where you've got some kids wanting to grow up to be a football player, an astronaut, a doctor, a movie star, a singer, playing a guitar, whatever those dreams are, for me, that was wrestling. And for me, wrestlers were the biggest stars on the planet. And I very much live in this bubble where I'm quite naive or immune or ignorant to what's going on in the real world. I don't have a TV license. I don't watch the news. I don't know about, world events and political events. And that, I live a very sheltered life. And to me, especially as a kid, wrestling was like the be all end all. And it's something that kind of, even in adult life now, yeah, I'm not as, as stupid or in that bubble, but still I'm very much in that bubble of following what's going on in wrestling. So much to the point where I wanted to become a wrestler myself. And hands down, it's the hardest thing that I've ever done. I'll talk about the physical stuff, but more importantly, the mental side of things is where the challenges come. So picture this, or imagine this. You are a little kid and you've wanted this thing all of your life. You've put it on the pedestal, just like in the 40-year-old virgin when, can't remember his name, Steve, I think it might be, basically Michael Scott, is putting that pussy on the pedestal. That is what I have done with WWE. I have put that on the pedestal, and for me, that is the ultimate dream, the ultimate goal in life, is to wrestle for WWE. So you can imagine now, as a 33-year-old man, being a 8-year-old kid, which is when I wanted to start being a wrestler, that 25 years I have put that on the pedestal of, this is my dream job. This is all I want to do with my life. It's a very taxing mentally and emotional thing that I've attached myself to, that to the point where if I don't at least have a tryout with WWE at some point in my life, I would consider my entire wrestling venture a failure. And when you think of how long I've been doing this for now, that's a long time to waste doing something in your life for it to be a failure. I've never been so polarized or so extreme with a goal in my life before. Bodybuilding, huge part of my life. Stepping on stage, massive accomplishment. Winning a local show, I've done it, massive accomplishment. Winning a national show, Mr. Great Britain, I've done it, buzzing. Just to compete in the NABBA universe, I've done it, buzzing. These are all goals, and whether I've won, I see them as an achievement and a success, an accomplishment. With wrestling, because the only success to me in wrestling is getting to WWE, or at least having a tryout with WWE, I see everything that comes underneath that as, and this is going to be polarizing, it's not meaningless, but in the grand scheme of things, if I was to look back, or if I think now, okay, I want to be a wrestler, I want to be a WWE wrestler, if I don't get WWE, I have failed in that goal. It would be very difficult for me to look back if I was 45, 50, 55 years old and think, oh, well, I did this. I wrestled on Progress. I wrestled on ICW. I wrestled Scotty 2 Hottie. I went to Qatar. I went to France. I went to this country. I did this. I wrestled this guy. There's going to be highlights and things that I enjoyed, but ultimately, none of that would come close to the actual goal that I've set out, which is to wrestle for the WWE. So imagine putting so much of your life, and I'm going to come to how much of my life I put into wrestling in just a moment. Imagine putting so much of your life, so much effort, time, and commitment of your life, of your schedule into something where the chance of making it is quite slim in terms of the number of people that get to do that. Imagine the mental toll of spending so much time and effort chasing a dream that financially I could be far, far better off. If I was a top WWE superstar, like a John Cena, a Roman Reigns, you know, a main event guy in WWE, yes, the financially it'd be worthwhile. But anything less than that, the career that I've got, the shoot job, the shoot career that I've crafted for myself, like, I'm very comfortable financially. And I enjoy what I do. It's not like I'm in a dead-end job, not earning much money, in a job doing something that I'm miserable with. That's not me. Like, I've got a good career. I've got my own business. I've got lots of projects that pay my bills and that I enjoy. But none of them are none of the things I do is what I wanted to do when I was a kid. None of what I'm doing now was my dream. Yes, things I like doing, but WWE is that dream. And I'm not chasing for the financial reasons. I'm chasing it because that 8-year-old kid inside of me, that's what I want to do. And I kind of feel like, almost in a way, that if I'd never, because I've dedicated so much of my life and I've committed to wrestling, if I never get that shot at WWE, it sounds extreme, but in a way that my life would be not a failure, but I would be very, very disappointed in the life that I've had if that doesn't come off. and it might never come off. And that's, from a mental aspect, why wrestling is so hard. So when that's the goal, it's hard to appreciate the things that come under that. And that's a me problem, because I should appreciate and I should be more grateful. And sometimes I do go through this, I'll speak to someone to kind of run down the points, the things I've accomplished, the things I've done. And it does perk me up a little bit. But ultimately, me thinking like mentally, or me being satisfied with what I've done, I'm not satisfied, because the goal is WWE. I've not done that yet, at least yet. So that's kind of putting it on the pedestal. So what do I need to do, or what am I doing? What have I done to try and get there? Why is wrestling, why is what I've done so far so hard? Starting in 2016, I did do some sessions when I was a teenager and then when I was 20, but I can talk about them in another video. Starting in 2016 is when I properly committed to wrestling. I found a training school local to me, started training, and that was it. I've stuck with it ever since. To go from wanting to be a wrestler to a wrestler on a show took me about a year. I was training for a year before I had my first match, and I think I had a little bit of a advantage or a head start, and I use the quotations as advantage because I have a physique. But coming into wrestling, and I was warned and told about this from people I made friends with in wrestling quite early on, I was told that people would hate me because of how I looked, and that did not make sense to me at all. I started wrestling later, 26, so I'd already, I'd been through school, college, uni, working in the corporate world, working in the real world, living in the real world, living outside of that wrestling bubble. I've never had someone hate me for no reason outside of wrestling. Never had someone hate me in my shoot career for any reason, especially when they don't know me. But I quickly found out that in wrestling, there's a lot of fragile egos, a lot of immature people who are very jealous and bitter. And that is what that meant about people hating me. So I kind of had that advantage, if you like, of coming in with a physique. But people meeting me in wrestling for the first time just assumed I always looked like that. I was born looking like that. That was me training from a teenager up until the age of 26 when I started wrestling to have a physique, to look muscular, to be jacked, dieting, training, committing my life to the gym. And I only did that because of wrestling in the first place, because when I was a kid, I wanted to look like a wrestler. So I started going to the gym. Started researching about how to put muscle on, how to get in shape, how to diet. And then that got me into bodybuilding, which made me even more serious and it became more of a lifestyle. So having this advantage took me about a year to get onto shows to wrestle. I was on shows a lot sooner than that, doing spots, angles. I was a character on shows, and that got me out in front of fans. It got me on some shows, on some promotions, and I was able to build up a bit of a following before having that first match. So I was very grateful for those opportunities. But just to get to that point of being ready to have your first match, I was training most weeks 3 times a week, working a full-time job, working a part-time job lecturing on top of the full-time job, going to the gym 5 to 6 times a week, and then making time for wrestling training. And wrestling training, it's not like a 10-minute drive to the gym. For me, wrestling training, for my local wrestling training, was a 45-minute drive, training initially in boxing rings. Then we moved venues, and we would train on a Monday night, then it moved to a Tuesday night, then it moved to a Monday night. Then I would also travel on a Wednesday night. I'd go to work for the day, take my wrestling gear with me. I would then drive from Middlesbrough to Oldham, about an hour and 50 minutes to the venue where I would train, to train with World of Sport legend Matty Jones. I would train with him. By the time wrestling training would finish, I would then drive home. I would get home usually around 10 to 1 in the morning. I would then be up for work the next morning on a Thursday at 5:30 for a breakfast morning networking event that I was part of. I would then, on Saturdays, travel down again to Oldham for another session of wrestling. So I was dedicating 3 training sessions 3 days of my week to wrestling training. Those wrestling training sessions would be anywhere from 2 to 4 hours. If there was a ring job to do for setting the ring up to training and then tearing the ring down and putting it away, that 2 to 3 hours in ring session would legit become, including the travel time, it could become a 7-hour kind of slot out of your day, where I would be leaving the house maybe at 6 o'clock, getting home at 12:30 on a Monday night. And it's a big time sink in wrestling. So obviously having the gym and then having work and having to earn money to pay bills and pay a mortgage, to just make the time to go training is hard. And I think looking back, if I could have done things differently, I wish I would have stuck with wrestling when I was younger and living at home with no commitments. That's what a lot of British wrestling is. It's a lot of younger guys living at home, no commitments. They've got the luxury to do that. That would have made things a lot easier. I was in that position. So it was either I train and I train this much and I make sacrifices time-wise elsewhere, or I just coast along. I don't train. I don't get trained. I don't get to pursue that dream. So that was kind of how taxing things were initially. And then the training sessions themselves, obviously very grueling. You can imagine on a Monday going to work, going to the gym, going straight from the gym to a wrestling training session where you were doing a cardio boot camp session as a warm-up. You're then doing your rolls, you're doing bumping drills, you learn how to wrestle, you're applying it, you maybe having a trainee match. Training sessions are a lot more difficult than matches because you're doing drills, you're doing bumping drills, you're doing cardio drills, you're wearing yourself out, you're doing drills over and over, and then you're having a match at the end. Whereas at a wrestling show, you go, you have a match, and that's it. So wrestling training sessions themselves are a lot more taxing. So that would be a Monday, then you're knackered for the week, and you quit in the gym, you're going to work, and blah, blah, blah. Very, very hard, time-consuming, very difficult thing to do. So you then get to the point where you're at a stage where you're on a show, or you've got the opportunity to be on a show, and then you have, what happened to me, there was a couple of guys in the same training school I was going to who would use my gimmick name, the tag team that I was in at the time. They would start parodying that on shows before I'd even debuted. So then you kind of getting that little bit of resentment or a little bit of shit, or you're just getting grief from people that you're training with early on, which then makes you think, have I done something wrong? Why don't these people like me? Who have I pissed off? When in reality, you haven't done anything wrong, and it's just people thinking they're funny or people insecure trying to kind of put a spanner in the works for you. So then that mentally is then playing on your mind, and you're kind of on, you're almost walking on eggshells because you don't want to piss anybody off. And in the real world, you know that you wouldn't piss people off, but in wrestling, you don't know how you're going to be perceived by some of the other people. You might not know all the rituals and the traditions, as a newbie coming into this. So you get on the first show, and to get on the first show, I would say I got lucky, but again, it was a case of I got recommended to some local promoters because some people at training saw how I looked, saw what I was like in the ring, and I was improving. Then they stumbled across my YouTube and thought, oh, this guy can talk, he could be a character, could cut some promos. I got on one show, and then that kind of got me onto other shows as that character. So I kind of, as I mentioned earlier, I probably would say I got a little bit lucky. But to get those opportunities on those shows, you've got to network, you've got to put the time in that training, you've got to then go to shows you're not booked at, introduce yourself to people, network, to hopefully get someone to vouch for you, hopefully get an opportunity to perform on a show, whether it's as a character, whether it's a promo, an angle, whether it's a match. And then once you get that spot, you've got to perform and do a good enough job in that spot that you hopefully will get asked to come back and start building up that bit of a profile. But working those shows initially, working the shows isn't the hard part, it's getting on the shows and trying to convince people or getting people to vouch for you or raising your profile enough or being able to offer something to a promoter that makes them want to use you as part of their show. And this is again another very mentally challenging thing, in the sense of you're putting the graft in with a real job. There's quite a clear progression system of you get a qualification, then you start applying that. You apply for a job or an entry level job, you get some experience, you get a promotion, you're then able to promote your way up in a company or jump around jobs and get a pay rise here and a pay rise here, a better job here, a better job here. And it's quite a easy system to figure out. In wrestling, it's a case of you're putting effort in that training, you're coming up with a character, you're putting the effort into thinking of what gear to wear and getting gear made, so you're looking professional. For me, putting it into my look, my physique. For me, especially in the early days, filming promos, filming skits, developing that character. A lot of the stuff outside of the ring is where I was putting in a lot of my time while I was still training and learning to be at the standard to put a match on. But then along doing all of this out of the ring stuff, you then go into that training 3 times a week, making time for training to be able to be ready to perform in a match and perform on a show. So you're putting all of this effort into getting that shot and getting that opportunity. And then you might see other people getting opportunities on shows you want to be on, and you'll message promoters, you go to promoters, you kind of ask, what can I do to get on the show? How can I, how can I be used on your show? And ultimately what I've learned is wrestling, it's almost like a casting call. Like, no matter what you can offer to promoters, sometimes it's just not a spot because that promoter isn't looking for you. Or, facing the truth here, not everyone will like you, whether it's personally or as a performer. Not everyone will like what I can offer. There'll be promoters out there who think I can't offer anything to their show. They might think I'm not a good enough performer, a good enough wrestler. Whatever the reason might be, whatever they think about my act, my character, my wrestling ability, there might be something that they just don't like. And rather than them saying, this is the reason I'm not using you, and then you move on and it's like, okay, I know that that's not for me. You're just constantly kind of mentally battling with yourself, wondering, oh, well, why aren't I being used? What can I do to be used? It's almost that mental torture of, trying to figure out a puzzle to get booked on these shows, when if you just had the answer of, you just don't, whatever the reason is, you're not a good enough wrestler, I don't like your gimmick, I don't like this, I don't like that, then it could be like, okay, I can improve on those bits to get on those shows, or I just know that that's not for me and I just won't approach that company anymore. So that is, again, a very mentally challenging aspect of wrestling. And then ultimately, to get to where I want to be, WWE, how do you get there? Like, what is the process of that? If I knew, I would be there. And the amount of times that I've had people say to me, like people outside of the wrestling bubble, people in the gym, friends, people at work, I was watching wrestling on the telly and you look like you could be on there. You wouldn't look like you're out of place on there. Or people in the gym going, like, especially when I'm, in shape bodybuilding, they'll say like, oh, you look like you'd belong, in America, or you should be on the wrestling on the telly in America. And it's like, and they'll say to me, I'll have wrestlers say to me, why I'm not WWE, as if that's my choice, as if I have chosen not to go to WWE. And I'm like, as nice as it is, because I kind of take it as a compliment when people are saying this to me, as nice as it is to hear that, if I knew the answer to those questions, I would be doing something about it to get onto WWE. And like I say, there's no clear-cut path to WWE. It's just kind of working, putting in the effort to getting on shows, to build a profile up online, to develop your character, to make that connection with the audience, to get better in the ring, to train, to work you up, to get on bigger shows, to build that buzz. It's just, you're doing all these things that you think might work, or you think that you need to be doing, in blind hope that hopefully one day you will get that opportunity. You'll get an email or a call, or someone will put you forward for that break and that opportunity. And it is for me, wrestling is more of a mental toughness thing. Like, physicality wise, yeah, it's hard. It is it is very hard. It's tiring. I torn my bicep twice. I've broken my shoulder. I will be having tight hips, tight back, a sore back, aching back if I've had a weekend of wrestling, a weekend in the car hunched up driving to a show, then wrestling, then coming home, then doing the same thing the next day. But I do it because I love it, and I do it because as a little kid, this is what I wanted to do back at the WWE. And wrestling in the British scene is kind of like, it's levels. And when I'm out there performing, I love it. Like, I love being in front of that crowd. I love wrestling. I love performing. And that is what drives me to continue doing at this level, to work you up to the bigger shows, to hopefully get that. I'm chasing a dream. That's honestly what it is. And sometimes I kind of think to myself, what the fuck am I doing with my life? Because if I put this much time and this much effort into my business or business projects or in other aspects of my life, I would probably be set for life. Like, I'm not saying I would be, you know, mega rich, but I'd be set for life. I'd be financially free and set for life at the age I am now. But as happy as that would make me, and I would want financial freedom, there would be nothing that would probably make me more, like, I've achieved something, and from a professional standpoint, happier than being able to actually work and wrestle for the WWE. Even if that was for 6 months, a year, one match on Raw, one match on SmackDown, that would be like the dream. It's like the boyhood dream has come true for Shawn Michaels. That would be my moment, just being, you know, there. Because that's what I wanted to do. It's all I've ever wanted to do since I was a little kid. And as hard as wrestling is, that is why I continue to do it. To literally chase that dream, to hopefully be able to achieve it. And will I do it? Well, I document most of this kind of stuff on the channel, so you can subscribe to follow the journey. I hope I do, genuinely. I hope I do. But we'll see. We will see. I believe I can. And if I didn't believe I can, I'd have quit this a long time ago. And I think the only way that I won't achieve that dream is if I quit. And if I quit, I've failed. And I do not want to fail at this. So, how hard is wrestling? Genuinely the hardest thing I've ever done in my life, as I've said in this video. If you have any questions about specifics of wrestling, the physicality, the training, the matches, what happens on show day, let me know. Put them in the comments below. Drop them on a channel. Follow me on Instagram and ask me, or on Twitter. And I can make those kinds of videos. But for now, I just want to thank you all for watching. And if you want to see what show day looks like on a wrestling day, you can watch this video here. And I'll see you all in the next video.